Welcome to Healing Lives with Corey Gilbert, a podcast sponsored by the Healing Lives Center. Discover how to love and lead your family well and biblically. God created sex, marriage, and the family for our stewardship, growth, and benefit. My heart and passion is to teach, train, educate, and disciple Christians that want strong marriages and families. The Healing Lives Center has been serving Christians since the year 2000. Its mission is to be a center for sex, trauma, and marriage education and transformation, where we offer counseling, coaching, courses, and speaking services to you, your church, or ministry. Check us out at healinglives.com. Welcome back. Today I have a wonderful conversation with Tina Davidson. Looking forward to this. So Tina, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, just totally delighted to be here. I'm coming out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. That's a little bit of a hike from you.
Yes.
But the weather is gorgeous here. We had such a hot, yucky summer, and then suddenly it just became beautiful. So
Nice. Nice. It's a beautiful area of the country for sure. We just got off a road trip, so see a whole bunch of the country. But
right. It is. I think it's called the breadbasket sometimes. This area that's been farmed by the Amish.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you have an amazing story of just your life and all that you've been through, and looking forward to today to kind of unpack some of your life story and then the lessons you can give us, which are the nuggets of what you found in life. So looking forward to learning from you today. So tell us a little bit about your life journey.
Well, let me tell you, first of all, give you a little bit of background. I am a classical composer. So I have spent the last 45 years writing music for string quartets, orchestras, choral, operas, out of a classical tradition. So you could write music out of a rap tradition or a country tradition. I happen to write out of a classical tradition. So they're more for concert ensembles. And recently, I just published a book called Let Your Heart Be Broken, Life Music from a Classical Composer. And it is about my childhood, some of the traumas. I had some illnesses, and how I, through those and with those, related to music. Now, I have to say, I've been playing the piano since I won't tell you, over 60 years. And my mother insisted, and I was a pretty compliant, happy little girl, and I said, okay. And by the time I was 7, I think I started when I was 5, and by the time I was 7, I was practicing an hour a day. So I know you can hardly imagine it with today's kids, right?
So true. My God.
You can hardly imagine it. Well, we didn't have as many distractions.
Right.
My mother was a college professor, and she really didn't care that we had friends. And she didn't like us to watch TV. Mm-hmm. So, we did a lot of reading and we practiced our instruments. I teach piano and composition now. I can't even begin to imagine asking my kids to practice more than a half an hour a day. I mean, that would be a miracle if they practiced a half an hour. But so I got to be a pretty good pianist. And then we lived abroad for a little bit. And then I went to college at Bennington College, and that's how I started to compose music. But I want to say that I won't say that music was the healer in my life, but music was a safe haven. And actually, I didn't really understand that until I wrote this memoir and then started to talk about it. Even when I wrote it in the memoir, I don't think I really understood what a safe place that was.
Oh, that's so neat.
So I had some traumas, and we can talk about those. But one of the effects of those is I could dissociate like anybody. I mean, you could just look at me the wrong way, and in my mind, I would be out of there. And sometimes they came with really deep depressions. But in a funny way, music, and maybe even reading intensively as a child, or maybe even watching television, has a kind of dissociation to it. You don't have to deal with the outside. You are not connected to the outside. It's this kind of private life that you have Music is not very tangible, so it wasn't like I had words for it. Certainly when I read, I was like going, oh, I had to be in, what was happening. But I do think in a funny way that those things like reading or music or even television watching, lots of television watching, game playing for younger kids now is a way of sort of not dealing with any of that, which can be very good and very bad. It depends upon the situation. If you have chaos around you, this might be a really good strategy. If you have things that you're not dealing with, it's not a good strategy. So just to prep, so I think, that was sort of my relationship with music, and it grew into a profession and into a voice for me. So you wanted to know a little bit about the backstory.
Well, and that the power of music, I think we are losing that. I think we are obliterating the power of music in our culture right now. Like, I hope there's going to be a revival. I hope there's going to be, basically, like, we're not raising up musicians either.
This is
we're not raising up people that even could write if they potentially had that. They spent all their time playing Xbox, or they've spent all their time. So, like, to me, this is potentially an art that is being lost, if you will. But we know that it does something to the whole brain. One of the things, music is one of the few things, playing an instrument does something. It affects the whole brain, where you mentioned like TV watching or even reading a book, it doesn't.
Right. It's so interesting. My beloved niece, when she was 16, tragically got a brain tumor. And I was part of her, a year and a half later, I was part of her 5-week care. And she could no longer talk, but she could sing, and she could sing the words.
Wow.
So where the music is with words is a different place in your brain. And there are a lot of people who have lost language because of traumatic injury or perhaps stroke. I don't know about stroke, but perhaps, and they learn through singing.
I love that.
Because
My kids, we do classical conversations. We homeschool, and they learned all their beginning memory work through song. Everything from math tables to history.
What a great idea.
All through song. And so it has been amazing to watch them.
Great.
Watching a movie.
It's kind of hard in an SAT exam when you go 2 + 2 and 2.
Yes.
Are you singing?
Yes. Well, then our oldest, because it's an experiment, our oldest finally did take the SAT and ACT, and he did great. And it's like, okay, good.
Yeah.
We've passed that barrier, but so you mentioned how with music, like, this is a powerful tool, and you're seeing it now, and you wrote your book, which exposed more to you about the power of it. But go backwards then to your story.
Yes.
What led to that?
So, there were a lot of things that led to me writing this book. I think because I was in my 60s and I really wanted to talk about not only my life, which could be important or unimportant, but the thing that I love so much, which is composing music. And I wanted to put words to how I felt about music, what my relationship was, and how I wrote music. Not like I'm going to take the pencil now and I'm going to write a D. I'm not talking about that, but what I hold in my head while I'm composing, usually a title, how my energy has kind of grown, what I think about melody, et cetera, et cetera. But to start with a backstory, when I was born in Sweden. And when I was 6 months old, my mother placed me in a foster home. And then she left. And I lived in this foster home. It was a wonderful foster home for 3 years until I was 3.5. And I was the youngest of 3 boys. And of course, I was totally adored. My mother was Solveig, my father was Torsten, and my youngest brother was almost my age. So we actually, for 3 years, were brought up as twins. We slept in the same room. We were potty trained. And apparently I was the instigator. I led him into some very naughty things, but That's another story. So when I was 3.5, one day, a young woman came. She was an American professor from the United States, and she adopted me and took me back to America,
Mhm.
where I soon, then she actually wasn't married at that point, and she got married, and I soon was the older sister of 5. But I always, and it's not that anybody treated me any differently. I mean, I knew I was adopted. It was never spoken about. I knew my mother didn't want to talk to me about it. Um, um, of course, I knew my brothers and sisters knew, and every once in a while they said, well, we don't have to obey you because you're adopted. You know how kids are, every once in a while, like once or twice that would come out. But I always felt like I was sort of outside of the family. They would talk about family relatives and, your grandfather, fought in the Revolutionary War. And I said, well, I know that it's not my grandfather, but I wish it was, So it was always that sense of not really belonging. And I think, and I don't think I'm unusual that kids who are adopted have this sort of secret, precarious sense of life. If I were given up at 6 months to live in a foster home and then adopted when I was 3.5, anything could happen. Maybe my birth parents would suddenly come.
Mhm.
And, I had these very secret fears about this. And it was very clear my mother was not going to talk about it.
Mhm.
So when I was 21, I happened to be back in Sweden. And I was taking care of a daughter of a family friend of mine, of our family. And I was there the whole summer. And just at the end, I waited to the last minute. I said, I think I'll go visit the adoption agency. So I called them up and they said, oh, and I always thought it was a Swedish girl. I was born in Sweden. I was adopted in Sweden.
Mhm.
Yeah. And they said, oh, no, they never allow Swedish children to be adopted by non-Swedish citizens. They never allowed their children to be adopted outside of the country. They said, well, we don't have anything, but call us back just before you leave. So the day before I left on the flight, I called up and they said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we have information, come down. And she was sitting there in this office and she had this piece of paper. She said, I'm reading a letter from your birth mother. And she asked me lots of questions about my life in America. And then she said, your birth mother is the woman that adopted you. Your adopted mother and your birth mother are the same.
Whoa.
And I just
Whoa.
thought, you mean, it was just like my whole reality kind of changed.
Oh
I
my
had been
goodness.
living like this adopted child, wanting to know where are my biological roots? What body did I come from? And I was sitting right next to it.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Well, I went back and I would talk to my mother, and she said, oh, she had this illegitimate child. She came up with a story. And I said, oh, well, that's great. Let's tell. I said, does Dad know, my stepfather? She goes, oh, no, nobody knows. I said,
Wow.
well, how about I tell my brothers and sisters? She said, nope.
Oh,
And it was a very, very hard time for our relationship
yeah.
for years after that. And so what did I learn? Well, first of all, when I write in the book, I say, you are entitled to privacy. Absolutely, 100%. You are entitled to privacy. But a secret that is about someone else can be extremely damaging. Doesn't mean that you tell everybody all your secrets.
Right.
Or even, you have to be very careful. It's sort of like AA. There's this time where you go and you make amends. There's some people, you don't say to your ex-wife, oh, and by the way, I was having all these girlfriends. Maybe that's not, she's divorced. It's not necessary for her to know that. So, you have to take care. But a secret like this was
Deeply
not
moving.
only devastating to me, but devastating to the whole family.
Mhm.
Do
Absolutely.
I understand and have compassion for my mother? Yes.
Mhm.
She was in an awful situation. She
Yeah.
was a young, extremely bright. She had gotten her PhD. She would have lost her job, no question. But it didn't mean that when I was 12 or 13, she couldn't have said to me, hey, honey, let's go talk.
Oh, please, yes. Oh, but did not.
And the trouble with secrets is that the longer you keep them, and they're about other people that you're in relationship with, the more you're edging around this secret, the more it is almost becoming a character in your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe even shaping how vulnerable you'll be willing. My mother didn't really talk much about her feelings. And so I think it also kept her very quiet about a lot of things. And I think she became more and more paranoid. She, even though time was progressing and she certainly wouldn't have lost her job,
Right.
she really felt that she would have lost her job. She became more and more, and she really felt that this had happened to her and it didn't have anything to do with me.
That's so sad.
And again, this is, I think,
Cultural too,
well,
at the
I think
time.
I think that this is why I always come down to emotional honesty.
Mm-hmm.
The quicker I can get to what I was doing and maybe say it to somebody else, oh, I realize, that or at least have a conversation with myself, like, oh, I could have done that better. I really think that the secret in our family really became kind of a Frankenstein
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of smashing around. And I write about it in my book about, it's your own personal Frankenstein, and like just what you didn't want.
Yep.
So when my daughter was born, when I was about in my early 30s, and I was holding her, I thought, oh, look at this. I can package up all my upsets and traumas and put it in a beautiful little box for her, and put wrapping paper around it and put a beautiful bow, and I could just gift it to her.
Oh.
And it could be her own special gift.
Oh no.
Or I could really get to work.
Mm-hmm.
And try to be a better version of myself, less controlled by some of this trauma. I had pretty severe depressions at that point. Fortunately, they weren't clinical depressions, they were really trauma induced. So I was very fortunate in that respect. So as I continued working really hard in therapy, the depressions really abated. And I would say by the time, by about 10 or 15 years after I really started working on it, I was completely, I have bad days occasionally, I'm in a bad mood, but not that kind of depression, where sometimes I would just slip away for months. I wouldn't even have the depression would lessen and I would feel like, oh, I'm awake. Where was I? Which was very disconcerting.
Yes.
But I really started to work hard on trying to understand myself. And then I started, oddly enough, putting that into my music.
So you've been writing for years already.
I had been writing for about 10 years before I started therapy. And that first 10 years, I have to say the music's a little bit disconnected. I don't love that the works in that 10 years. There's some of them are okay, but I just don't feel I was awake. And then when my daughter was born, actually I was writing a piece called Blood Memory.
Interesting.
Yes. And so it's that idea of that through our relatives, we have a memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's subtitled A Long Quiet After the Call. So there's that sense that history calls to you. And then I started really exploring my sense of trauma. I have a piece called Dark Child Sings, which is a cello quartet, which is sort of allowing my dark little girl or boy, I don't know what gender, it always feels like a little boy, to sing and to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I felt like a little boy when I was with all my brothers.
Yep.
Maybe.
So I just thought too when you said that.
I don't know. But there were so many pieces that I wasn't trying to write about them, but what the work I was doing and my creativity were like sort of all intertwined. So I would say that the second 10 years was really writing about myself as a young mother, as a woman, as coming out of this trauma. Oh, I have a piece called Transparent Victims, which is for multiple saxophones. And I think it was sort of that there are a lot of children out there that are victims, but nobody can see them as victims, so they're transparent. I have another piece called Requiem for Something Lost. So I was writing a lot about that. And as you can see, my titles were always very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
They have very evocative. And then at the end of that second decade of composing, I started really wanting to write music that was really more about my relationship to the outside world, or to the spiritual world, or to heaven, or I have a very sort of strong connection to what I think you'd call God. I don't call it God, but it's the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bigger thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started writing a lot of music about my relationship to that. I have a piece called Celestial Turnings. Oh, I have a piece called a string quartet called The Delight of Angels, because according to Christian and Jewish traditions, the angels would always dance continually dance in their joy of God. That they would just dance, and it was just the way that they spoke or were with God in their joy and their love of God, as they just perpetually danced. And I thought that was such a wonderful idea, to be in that kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of a total relationship,
Mm-hmm.
where it's only one thing.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, so that was sort of my exploration of what it would be to be dancing ceaselessly in the presence of the divine. So it is interesting that you have a Christian following, and I do write a lot about my relationship with God, although it's not a Christian. I'm not a practicing Christian. I have a piece that I wrote recently. Actually, we're going to record it. It's called Barefoot. And it is about walking on the earth in your bare feet.
Mm-hmm.
But the analogy is always the burning bush, and how you have to take off your sandals to be in the presence of God. Mm-hmm. And there is something very holy about being shoeless. Your feet on the earth, or in the sand or the dust, or the, something that in the presence of God. So that's a piece, I think it's originally for string orchestra, but I think it's a string quartet and piano that we're recording it in.
Oh, that sounds so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, and one of the things about music, and one of the things you're describing even today, is I love that you take such care on the titles. But one of my favorite parts of any music is the behind the scenes of why that was written,
Mhm.
What is the author, the composer attempting to say, portray? I was emphasizing to one of my kids the other day because we have our TV, we have surround sound. I love good music. I love my bass. I love, um, and
Great.
I was like, this movie ended and it had such a majestic music piece, and then it square, it's got bigger and bigger, and then done. And I was like, man, imagine that movie without the music score. Because my boys especially don't pay attention to that, and I'm like, that's just gorgeous. The
Mhm.
impact of music,
Yeah.
it makes or breaks almost everything from church services to
Mhm, mhm.
music or
Well,
to
and the
movies.
community commune that
Mhm.
you're in commune with others while singing is so important.
Yes.
And harmonies.
Oh, I love harmonies.
Oh my gosh, have you ever listened to Elvis Presley do uh male quartet Bible songs?
I
Oh
have
my
not in
God.
forever.
Oh, they're so beautiful. Really old-timey
Nice.
kind of sounds and his voice. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing. Music does something. Even if we all have everyone likes different kinds of music, and everyone has their different preferences and tastes, and but it's one of those things that does something powerful. It's neat that you found that young,
Mm-hmm.
and that yes, you turned it into a profession, but it has served a role in your life, leading to the book now,
Yes.
and leading to even discoveries now of your own story, which I think is incredible.
Well, and it's also a passion of mine to teach composition. For many, many years when I was living in Philadelphia, I was going into inner city schools where they didn't have music programs and teaching kids who were in fourth and fifth grade. I created this whole program called Young Composers. And what we did, I wasn't going to teach them notation, of course not. But I wanted to, I got them for 10 different lessons. So usually once a week for 10 weeks. And the goal was that they would create enough music in their class of their own compositions that they perform for the school.
Oh, I love it.
Long program, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, but so when I went in, and I'd done lots of teaching in schools, and I found that they didn't have any musical instruments. The school didn't have music programs.
Yep.
So then I said, okay, kids, what do you have at home that we can make instruments out of? They go, junk. I said, okay, bring in your junk. No glass, plastic, shoe boxes, cans. And, suddenly we made guitars out of shoe boxes. And then we glued cans together and they had a drum set. And then, they would have sort of pan flutes out of Coke bottles. And I said, okay, let's write music using graphic notation, which is how do you draw the sound? If you had to draw a sound like a beep, 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 maybe you just have and then they would create stories, where they'd have somebody walking in, maybe it was a haunted house, and they would shake chains, but they had to draw it. They had to kind of create a map.
Hmm.
And then we reduced the paper, and I said, okay, now I want you to make symbols of the sound. How long is the sound? How high or how low? And they created these wonderful pieces. And I don't know, I have just such a passion about ensuring that anyone that I'm with, that they get from me that they are creative people.
Hmm.
And to me, as a teacher, that's what I want to teach. Not, I'd love it if you'd become a composer, but more that you value your creativity, that you really believe in it, you trust it, and that nobody can say, "Oh yeah, well you don't have any creativity." That it's like you have two arms, you have two legs, you have creativity. Um,
I went to college in music, and so I majored in music.
mhm,
My heart and passion was music ministry. I majored in composition,
mhm.
and then found out my junior year that you have to have talent. And so my professor sat me down and they were like, "You're not going to be able to pass your recitals. You're not going to graduate." And they loved me enough to not let me fail. Instead, they prepared me, and so I had to find a new new adventure, my life. I felt like it ended. But then the next semester, I took a counseling class. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in my counseling degree, and they start the practicum with the picture of the director of an orchestra, and to then go into my now 23 years as a therapist, counselor, and go, wow, what I'm doing is in a different side of that craft, if you will. I'm not doing actual music. It's other, as I work with families.
And that music experience, it just totally enriches. I mean,
yes.
I teach a lot of piano and a lot of cello. They don't have to become great musicians, but
it transforms them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that I'm always telling them that they're in charge of their creativity, that it belongs to them. It's one of their innate gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And, I grew up in a time where people would say, oh, don't sing, you have a terrible voice. How many people were silenced?
True.
And I really take offense at that. I love it when people sing and they're off key.
That's what I like about some churches are all about performance, and I don't like that. Versus the churches where, hey, Aunt Susie wants to get up there and sing, and she's got to bring it. It's worship.
Yeah, no, I believe that for myself too. I mean, of course, I'm a professional composer, and I certainly want my performers to be,
excellent.
But I do say I was just up at a festival in Rhode Island, and these were great performers, but it was just the last concert of 2 weeks of performing. They were exhausted. There wasn't quite enough time. And I finally said to them, they were really kind of discouraged. And I said, look, forget the notes. Just forget the notes. Play the music.
Mm-hmm.
Just play. I said, so you make some mistakes. Who's going to know? Maybe just me. They went off and practiced some more. And they said to me, oh, we got a little lost. I said, oh, nobody knew. And it was a wonderful performance. It got, a standing ovation. Nice. I mean, so for my recordings, I do expect a higher bar.
Of course. And there's a time and a place for performance and near perfection. And you got an audience, maybe even an audience that paid a lot of money. Like there's different places for, I grew up in South America, and if you were visiting the church and you had an instrument with you, it's like, come on up, join the band. We never rehearsed one time ever in my whole growing up years. Mm-hmm. And then I came to the United States, and it's like they rehearsed for everything. That was new to me.
Okay.
And both are acceptable. So it's just different settings and different cultures. And I love how you've used music, and you've used it to even address that word trauma. Mm-hmm. You've written pieces that seem to be almost therapeutic for you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's helped you kind of process. How else has that impacted your life and your story up to this point in your life? The different pieces you've written and the why behind them.
Right. I want to say there's something that's really interesting about the arts. And I also find it with writing. I get to know myself better when I write it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not only that, I think there's something about, and performing is all about motion. You have the finger motion, you have the bow motion. It's very kinetic. Mm-hmm. And writing or painting is very kinetic as well. And I think that also helps you sort of unlock maybe, I don't know about deeper, but broader. I don't know exactly.
I think it's deeper, big time deeper.
Yeah. The other thing I always sort of laughed about my music, I always thought I was putting myself into the music, and the music was really all about me. And sometimes I get a little nervous because I don't want people to think that, because not all composers write about themselves.
Right.
They write all different ways. But for me, I am sort of the growing medium. I was just writing a blog about how when I was a child, my aunt came back from the lab and she brought these agar plates that have this clear growing medium in a little dish. And then you put a thumbprint in, or you scrape off the kitchen, and then you smear it on, and you see what bacteria grows. And it's kind of amazing what the invisible looks like. Mm-hmm. And I felt that my music was sort of like that growing medium. So sometimes I have this funny relationship with music. Sometimes, like, the notes will really behave and they really stay where I put them. And sometimes they kind of walk away, or, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Sometimes I erase them and they reappear. I do think that's sort of because there is an inner logic for myself, and maybe that section was cementing part of the piece together, and I was taking. I'm always amazed when I finished a piece that the piece is almost like instructing me, teaching me something about myself. I keep on thinking I'm putting myself in the work, but there is this very reciprocal thing that happens that is just wonderful. And I go, oh, that's the next direction. Oh,
and that next piece then that musician picks up their bow or their instrument to then interpret. Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother connection point, because there's the person that can sit there and make it go perfect, and there's no life.
Yeah, and I'm very clear about
get
that.
The notes.
In classical music, there is this tradition with classical works, is that we want to drill down to see exactly what Beethoven was meaning. We want to play it exactly as Beethoven wanted us.
Yeah.
And I have a very fluid relationship. Mm-hmm. I didn't put those notes there haphazardly. However, I know that when a performer plays that piece, they have to collaborate with it. It's
I like that word. That's a great word, collaborate. Yeah. Yes, I like that.
It's not like I made a suit of clothing and they're struggling to put it on. It's that it has to have enough give in it that they can put themselves in it and inhabit it and make it their own.
Picture. That is such a neat picture.
And it is that collaboration that I love. And then, in a sort of magical way, they have to collaborate with the audience, because the music doesn't exist unless you can hear it.
Yeah.
And there is something about the performer and the listener. If you play a piece just by yourself, it's so different than when you perform it for others. Yep. There is this kind of tension or energy or exchange that happens. So I always feel that music is one great big collaboration. I have to collaborate with the notes, or they're saying, yeah, we had to collaborate with her. And then the music collaborates with the performers, and then the performers collaborate with the audience to create this sharing that goes on.
And that picture you just said, that sharing, to me, that is what it's all about. Like, I love concerts.
Yeah.
Good music. And I like all genres. But like, we went, my son in his class, he's in 10th grade, or was in 9th grade, now in 10th grade. And then we went to Portland, Oregon, to the 10 Grands. So they had 10 grand pianos, and they had all these different musicians rotating through, and other instruments, and kids coming up there and performing. And I'm on the edge of my seat. It's like heaven to me. And my wife was there. She tolerated it. Like, her experience is very different.
That's okay. Maybe she got 10 or 15 minutes of it.
Yep. But the way they interpret
whatever you get, it's fine by me. I'm in it for the long run. Yeah.
You're deeply invested for the long run.
Yeah, and
I
love my profession. I keep on wanting everybody to write music or have permission to explore it. I remember years and years ago, I was a young student. I was in some sort of concert setting at some university, and there were these two old professors sitting in front of me. And this was just when computers were starting to become personal computers. And they were talking to each other, and I heard one of them say, this means that anybody will be able to write music because they have a computer.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of like anybody can breathe now.
Yes. You've got to be the gatekeepers. No,
Right,
can't let it happen.
exactly. And so I just feel that the more people that find an art form and do the art form, the more connections and more listeners, people who are interested in it. That's I sort of subscribe to an abundance theory.
Yep,
and not a scarcity theory about.
Well, I think because we are, like I said in the beginning, we are in a potential scarcity season where we need young people to stop the Xbox and to be practicing an instrument. They say that a teenage boy, especially from age 15 to 30, the amount of time they spend on some video game, they could be a master sculptor, master of any instrument.
I think it's 10,000 hours.
It's insane. They could and instead we're wasting our times oftentimes either just consuming or just passive.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think that in my generation, a lot of people smoked pot and it was sort of the same effect. They never learned how to relate because they were kind of stoned.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to deal with mom or with dad or with their girlfriend or with their boss because they were always, and, they kind of woke up in their late 30s and 40s and kind of said, oh my God, I don't know how to relate.
Yep.
So I think, we're having a kind of a different unrelating, if you're going to spend this much time alone learning to relate with the game, rather than with people around you, it does put you at a huge disadvantage in your job, in your marriage, in your community, in your world.
Yeah. And the why behind what you're doing with your time, we have a limited amount of time.
We do.
So to steward that time,
precious. It's very precious.
If you have a family, what you do with your children. If you have a spouse, what you're doing with your spouse. Other people that you need to invest in, or others that need care, an aging parent, or like we have a limited amount of time. Our purpose is critical, which I mean, as a college professor, that's my heart, is helping my students find their purpose.
Right.
So some come in and they major in counseling psychology, and I help them through. Others, it's like, no, this is not for you. So let's help you figure out where. Just like I had professors that did that for me. That led to a different journey. And I love that you've also made the connection of your music to your own story, to really actually that word healing. Healing is a process, not healed, but healing.
Oh my gosh, it's such a process. And a lot of times you work on something, you really get it down, you really figure it out. And that thing that you were working on just changes clothing and gets back in line and bugs you again. And it's like, I thought I learned, but it's part of this wonderful life that it's not a done deal.
Which your website is tinadavidson.com.
tinadavidson.com.
tinadavidson.com. And you can access music and your books on Amazon as well, which is Let Your Heart Be Broken, Life and Music from a Classical Composer.
Yes, and I'll show you that it's got a great cover.
Oh, great cover. Love that.
Really fun cover. So can I leave you with one thought?
Sure, please.
Okay. So I was asked by a podcaster to put down 10 things I wanted to teach, tell other people. And this is I put down 11. Oh, well, I never was always very good at following rules. So number 10 is, I like number 9. When blocked in your work, take a nap.
Nice.
The brain has an amazing ability to solve problems when left alone. Now, okay, that's practical. So number 10, share your joy. Communicate your love of work with others. share rather than teach, motivate rather than lecture, include rather than talk to.
Nice.
Teaching implies a hierarchy. Sharing is between equals. So share your joy.
Love that.
Share your joy, yes.
Love that. That's so important. As a counselor and as a teacher, that to me is critical, is partnering with my students, not
anxious. Oh, people get so excited. Yes. Yeah. Share your joy.
Love it. Well, Tina, so great meeting you and talking with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really love this conversation.
Well, bless you and bless your future.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you for tuning in to the Healing Lives with Corey Gilbert podcast. It has been an honor to serve. If you are struggling, have questions, or in need, Dr. Gilbert offers a free consultation for new clients. Check us out at healinglives.com to book a call. If this has been helpful to you, please share it, leave a review, and help us get the word out so that we can see lives changed, marriages transformed, and more people come into a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ. The Healing Lives Center offers online courses, programs, books, intensives, and other services to help you live biblically and well. Discover more resources on YouTube and in Dr. Gilbert's Healing Marriage Facebook group, The Healing Marriage.